Okay, hello again. This is Ron with Mobile Fix Automotive. I'm going to do another quick little video that hopefully help you guys on your do-it-yourselfers. Today we are working on a 2006 Ford 500 3.0 V6. We're going to show you how to do the alternator on this thing without tearing your hair out. I'm going to make it easy for you. So, okay, on this car here, there's a bunch of different ways you can do the alternator. Now, the alternator on the Ford 500 is mounted. Let me grab a flashlight, help you guys out here. Okay, the alternator on the Ford 500 is mounted in the rear of the engine, just above the right side axle shaft assembly, okay? Because most do-it-yourselfers are competent enough to do basic repairs, I didn't do everything for you. Like I pulled the belt off already. If you're capable of changing the alternator, I shouldn't have to show you how to take the fan belt off. But here's what you're going to do to change this alternator, okay? There's a plastic shield on the alternator that has to come off. There is a sensor right here for the crank position sensor that has to be disconnected, and then this little plastic clip right here or push pin needs to be pulled out of the plastic. There's another plastic push pin that goes in the cover right here, okay? Then in the back of the alternator you're going to have the electrical connector that has to be pulled out, and there's also a 10mm nut. At least it should be a 10mm if nobody's dinked with it already, where your electrical wire comes on. Now I won't be able to show you that on video because the camera won't fit up in the hole, but you can reach your arm up in here and get to them, okay? Now here's where the shortcut comes in. A lot of people will tell you to pull the suspension and all this other stuff. All you need to do to pull this alternator out and do it quickly is what we call a subframe drop, and you don't even have to pull the subframe all the way out. What you're going to deal with is there's two 13mm bolts right here on this bracket. There's an 18mm bolt right here for the rear subframe. There's a 21mm bolt right here on the front subframe. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but right here, that's all the gap that you need. You don't even have to take this bolt all the way out. Now, I'm in a shop. I'll step back so you can see. I'm using a pole jack, but I've only got the subframe lowered enough to be able to get the alternator out for us right now. In other words, you don't have to drop this thing all the way down and damage anything in the engine. On the rear one, I don't know if you can see it, it's only about 3/4 of an inch gap in the rear. So here's the step-by-step process. Get the car safely up off the ground. I understand most of you that aren't going to be doing this in a shop are going to be doing this on the ground. So you'll jack the front of the vehicle up and you'll put safety stands underneath it to protect yourself. Once again, just for safety, this is being done at your own risk. I'm not responsible for anything that you've done wrong or any repairs that you fail on. But hopefully this is going to be a video to help you guys out. Okay, so take your front tire off. That's already been done. Like I said, shouldn't have to show you how to do that. You're going to go with the tool from the bottom's the easiest, and here's your tensioner right here. I use a ratchet. Take your belt off. Once your belt is off the alternator, you're going to need, well, you don't need, but the easiest tools for you to use. There are 3 15mm nuts that you're going to deal with. The first 2 that you're going to take off is going to be the one on the top of this platform up here and the one on the bottom of this platform, the two forward nuts, okay? Once those are off, and I've already loosened them to save video time, okay? So there's that nut, and then there's that. You're going to pull this shield back, okay? You've already disconnected your electrical wires on the rear, so you're going to pull this shield back and tuck it up out of the way. Just tuck it up inside. I'll give you some more light up in here so that you can see what's going on. You're just going to tuck this thing up into the rear. And what that's going to leave you with is there's going to be 3 studs on the alternator. One up here that you can't see on the top, which no longer has a nut holding the alternator on. This forward stud, which no longer has a nut holding the alternator on. And then the rear one, which has one 15mm nut that's holding the alternator on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this steering rod off. Okay. Normally what you're going to do is you're going to hit it with a hammer. I already put my hammer away like an idiot. There we go. So you take the nut off, it's 21mm. Whack it right here on the spindle. Don't hit the threads. As a matter of fact, the best thing for you to do is leave the nut on here so that when you hit it, there we go. Pull that out. Put the nut back on there so you don't mess the threads up. Okay. This is your outer tie rod in on the passenger side. Just going to let it hang. Okay. Okay, I know it's dark up in here. Bear with me. Okay, so we're just going to take an air ratchet with a 15mm. We're going to go up in here. We're going to loosen this nut. Okay. Now, the electrical wire is disconnected from the back once again. The 10mm post that for the charging wire. So there's 2 electrical wires in the back that you're going to have to disconnect. One's a plug-in and one's a bolt-on. They get done before you pull the plastic cover off. Okay. So once you get that done and you tuck that plastic cover up, I guess I should be looking at this and not looking away since the camera's mounted on my head. Okay, now we have to remove these 2 studs, but only these 2 studs. You do not have to take the top stud off. Okay, I do that with a 1/4" air ratchet, 1/4" in size, with a 1/4" wobbly socket. I'm basically going to go up in here. I'm going to pull these things off. Okay. There's one stud. The alternator likes to slide back on you. They like to get happy like that. Okay, there's the second stud. You'll notice that the alternator is already starting to come off. Okay. Pull the alternator off and just let it sit right there. Put your stud aside. Okay, now here's the key. You don't have to take any of the suspension stuff off. There is a 10mm bolt right here on the brake line bracket. I've already loosened it to save video time. I'm going to take that off, which is going to allow this to push up out of the way. And then I'm going to take this alternator and I'm going to tuck it under, turn it sideways. Okay. Get the brake line up out of the way. Get this bracket past there. Turn the alternator backwards. Alternator comes right out in my hand. I do these in about 30 minutes start to finish. Okay. And then to put it back in is exactly the opposite. You just take it, tuck it back up in there, okay, roll it, and then you're going to reassemble it the way you did before. Now the way I do this to kind of make it easy on me, you guys can do it any way you want, is I'll take that rear bottom stud, I'll put the nut on it. Okay, now the first thing you're going to want to do is get the alternator onto the top stud. Okay, so just kind of feel up there with your fingers. Slide this thing up on here. and then get this first stud started by hand. And once you get it started, the nut will keep the alternator from falling back out. Now you can run that stud up. If I can, oh, hung it from my pole jack. I noticed when I do these a lot, it's best if you take the alternator and wiggle it up to the engine before you do this step. Otherwise it'll bind on you. Okay, once that's done, the alternator is going to stay in place. Okay, you're going to put the forward lower stud back on. Now remember, you don't put any nuts on the top stud or the bottom stud until you put the plastic shield back on. So at this point, I'm going to tighten down this nut, and then I'm going to put this stud in. I'm going to put the shield back on, and then I'm going to put the two nuts back on the shield. There's absolutely no reason to fight these things, guys. There's no need to tear your hair out. These are really easy to do. Okay, once that's done, switch over to your 15 millimeter. Tighten this alternator nut down right here. Okay. Now, I'll give you a little bit of light. Take this protective shield that I still question why the Ford engineers came up with, but they did, and we have to deal with it. And you can leave it off if you want, but the exhaust manifold's right next to it, and I kind of have a feeling that's the reason why they put it there, was to help guide cool air from the front of the engine so that you're not sucking hot air to cool the back of the alternator bearings. Okay, and so there's these two 15 millimeter nuts. Get these back on here. Got to kind of be ambidextrous to do this, but get that back on there like that. Okay, once you get that one tight, get your top one tight. Reconnect your electrical connectors on the back of your alternator. Put your fan belt back on properly. Reconnect your suspension. Reconnect your outer tie rod. Reconnect your brake line bracket. Tighten up the 18 millimeter subframe bolt that you loosened to lower the rear subframe. And then on this one, I actually took that 13 millimeter bolt, head bolt out. It's not a 13 millimeter bolt, but the size of the socket that goes on it's 13 millimeter. So I took that out, and then your 21 millimeter, you zip those back up in with an impact wrench or tighten them down with a good breaker bar. You can torque them to specification if you want. That puts the subframe back up into the car an inch, and start the car up, check to make sure your alternator is charging, and you're a done deal. You guys just watch me pull that alternator out and put it back in less than 10 minutes on this video. There's no need to go through all the hustle and bustle of doing this. So 2006 Ford 500 3-liter V6 alternator replacement. And have a nice day. Hopefully on the next video we can show you some more shortcuts.